Here's a little Italian course for everybody. I'm Italian. It's Daniele. Guess the trick to pronounce it right? That's Daniele.
Daniele. You have to do the hand as well, do you? Daniele.
See, it works. It works. Get this person an Italian passport right now. My name is Daniele, and I've built developer platforms and developer ecosystems over most of my career. I started at Facebook at this team called Solutions Engineering. My manager joked we made the money to buy Instagram 1 year because our run rate was $1 billion. Insane. And then fast forward to this other company that was called Twitter at the time. And I also was the head of developer relations, working to reboot the developer ecosystem. And as part of that, we built what the fastest adopted API ever in the history of the Twitter developer platform. And now I'm building Toolhouse, which allows everybody to build AI in just one API call or 3 lines of code. What's Toolhouse? Toolhouse is the most straightforward developer platform to build AI. Our vision is to connect AI to the real world. What does it mean? It means that right now, if you're a developer and you're building AI, you need to do a ton of integration, a ton of code. It's like you have this perfect use case or this perfect app. It's like you have this perfect house, and the house, maybe you bought it, you flipped it, you have the best materials inside. It does all you want. And then you open the door, step out, and there's nothing around. You need to build the plumbing yourself. You need to build the sewage yourself, the electricity, the power grid yourself. And that's not how houses work. Like, you go in a city, you get the house, and you just start living there. AI today is that equivalent of the house in the desert. So we build what's around your house so you don't have to. And you can just plug your house the way you want, your use case, and you already have all you need to run a fantastic AI apps. So that's just it. Like, we do some flash hackathons sometimes to demonstrate that people can walk out of a meetup in 3 hours and they build something they can put a Stripe link on, some marketing, and they're ready to sell. And it's just amazing. Like, we saw this extremely intense growth. Like in January, we grew by a factor of 43x, just month over month. So it's great because there's a big problem. Like, developers right now are cut off from AI entirely. Like, they think that AI is finding the right embedding model for their RAG application. But then where's the use case? What are you going to do with that actual RAG? So a ton of developers miss the forest for the trees. Also, you see big AI models outcompeting small startups or even larger enterprise on talent. They just offer $400,000 a year for a mid-junior React engineer, and they ask you to spend at least $200,000 a year to get a 6% discount on their tokens. And who in the world has the ability to do that? Sure, in the US, you have about 1 million developers that build for AI, but the world is 40 million developers. And they come from India, they come from Europe, they come from Latin America. They don't have the same spending power and the same negotiating power. So I want to think that it should be illegal that this ecosystem works this way, by jacking up prices and then selecting as the model provider, who do you want to use your product? Everybody should have access to AI. And so that's what we're doing with Toolhouse. We're giving every developer in the world the ability to build their own agents and to do it very, very simply.
So when we think about the democratization of AI, was kind of really, well, that's what's kind of happened with the rise of ChatGPT, that just the average person who is not tech, they can go onto ChatGPT and ask questions and it works for them. You're kind of taking that same democratization idea, but actually taking it to the builders. And so it's not just around which model do you want. It's, well, it doesn't matter which model you want. You have a problem to solve. And so we can give you, 3 lines of code that allow you to very quickly solve the problems. So if you think, I need to talk to an AI and ask it these questions, and then whatever it does, I need to integrate that with, as you say, Stripe or other platforms. I want to do RAG against Pinecone. I want to send emails or whatever it is you need to do. That kind of connectivity between, I send some tokens to a Gen AI and I get some tokens back. Now I have to do something with that. You've built that connectivity in that 3 lines of code. So suddenly developers their productivity is going up through the roof because they're not thinking, how do I take the output of my AI and make that do something? I can just say, yes, tools equals toolhouse.getTool, whatever. And that part just happens. And I can focus on the core value that I am adding to the users of my system, not focusing on building out, as you say, the sewage, the electrics, the water supply, all those kind of utility things that really should be there for everyone.
Exactly. That's nailed it. So a lot of the complexity of building for AI is really figuring out, first, what are the bits and pieces you need for your app. And so I need to build a note-taking app that also sends me a digest of all the meetings I had at the end of the day, each day. Do I need a vector database? If so, what vector database do I need? What embedding model do I need to put in there? What kind of other API do I need? How do I connect to Google Calendar? What if I'm using Outlook 365 instead? All these kind of decisions are adding friction between you, like and your app and your use case. And the road is so long, and that's on purpose because everybody wants to have, every company wants to have its stake at every step of the way, And so developers think, oh yeah, maybe I need that, or maybe I need that. Instead, what developers need is to just build an app. And so it all started with those 3 lines of code. We made this SDK that already encapsulated a lot of the basic functionalities that every AI developer needs to build 80% of their use cases. That works pretty well for us to give us the first part of our growth trajectory. Then we realized that about 80% of the agents that were built, and we noticed that at hackathons, but we also talked to a lot of larger companies, those 80% of agents they built, they never left their laptops. They didn't even make it into their staging environment. So it was all something that will run in a browser. That's not sustainable, obviously. How do you build an agent that's actually useful, that works for you at night? It's not going to happen unless you have the right infrastructure. And so we started to build the infrastructure as well. And we made it even simpler in the process for developers to build their own agents. Right now we have 2 products. One is called Prompt Studio. And Prompt Studio, when you open it, it looks like ChatGPT, except you already have an environment that runs agents on your behalf, and it's preloaded with all the Toolhouse tools. So you enter into this ChatGPT-like interface, you type what the agent is supposed to do, and then Toolhouse does a couple of things. It already plugs all the relevant tools so the agents can use it. And then when it works, you can obviously iterate, you can add variables and stuff like that. You can, it's already an API. So you don't even have to write those 3 lines of code anymore. It's already deployed in our cloud as an API. If you're happy with the results, that's your agent. Go make a curl request. You don't want to make a curl request? Great. You can actually schedule this agent to run at intervals. And so there's this functionality called schedule runs, or schedules for short, where you can get the agent you just built and then say, okay, I want to run this every Monday at 8 a.m. or every 10 minutes. And with a click of the button, you have this API. Inside this API, there's an agent that runs the schedule, and it's already in production. And that gives us that kind of hockey stick curve of growth, because that's what developers need. Like, developers just need to build. They just want to build, and now with Toolhouse they can.
So just in terms of a developer's productivity of releasing an agent, what you'd have to do in the past is you have to fire up LangChain or what have you and write all your code to make a call and then make that do things. Write the code to get the response back from the AI, make the call to the thing. And then, as you say, a lot of people, they just sit on their machine because you then have that whole kind of DevOps cycle of, how do I deploy this to my production infrastructure? What cloud am I on? How do I put this out there? And so just that effort level of turning it from the fun toy on my machine to a fully deployed application is kind of a barrier that's going to stop people doing it. But what you're doing is, no, once you write your prompts, it's almost kind of prompt engineering led. Once you've written the prompts, 1 click deploy. I've got it in my infrastructure. I can do scheduling. I can do APIs. By taking away that barrier, suddenly a developer is more likely to go from the idea on their laptop to fully deployed, because it's so much easier. And I think that's one of the struggling points for a lot of folks is, if the hard part is getting it in production. That first 90% of building software is to write the software. the second 90% is putting it in production. Yeah, you always think it's going to be small, but it's not. It's as much work. But you're saying, well, no, actually, the second 90% is just that 10% because it just works. Because you're working with Groq, aren't you? That stupidly fast. Was it they call them LPUs or something?
LPU, language processing units. They're the best. Yeah.
Yeah, because that runs really, really quickly, from my understanding. It's the highest inference of a whole lot of different LLMs of any platform.
Yeah, and it shows. Like, it's like, I shouldn't say this in a podcast, but first of all, don't drive safely. But if you go to a racetrack and then you drive a very fast car, and you can go like 160 miles an hour, and then you finish your session at the racetrack, you get your normal car, and you do like 60 miles an hour on a freeway, you kind of see the difference, and you kind of want to go back to the racetrack. Speed is kind of addictive, and the Groq is basically that equivalent. Like, if you look at like a Llama 3.3, or even now with DeepSeek, the insanely fast speed really makes streaming irrelevant anymore. You can just get those requests as a pure API call and get the result back. For the same time, you'll get the first few tokens streamed with any major inference provider. And I think that's going to be extremely helpful in the next generation of AI, which is going to be less text and more like voice, natural language based, more so than just like writing prompts. The prompt is what we will tell our teammate to do, rather than just a script with instructions, and you need to have some sort of latency. And I think of use cases like really for us millennials and Gen Zs, like getting on the phone with customer service. That shouldn't exist anymore. Like, the human today is the API interface. Like, they have a computer behind the scenes, and they just need to type things in their internal interface. If you can make that more efficient, where you can have somebody just like talking natural language at any point in time with anything, then you already have better experience for your user and better efficiency even for your operator. Another thing, this is part of the hackathon that we actually did in Europe, and it was all about the public sector. How can we help like first responders with AI? How can we help the public administration with AI? And there was a team that had this nice idea of basically collecting first responder calls and making sure that the checklist for all the relevant information was there. So there was an AI that would help the operator understand, okay, we have the location about this emergency. We know what kind of emergency do we have. We know if we need to dispatch an ambulance. We don't know if we need to send the police. So ask this. So it will collect in real time and file the report on behalf of the operator. So the operator could just focus listening to the actual problem rather than just like waiting, typing, and asking the next question. And that was a very interesting aspect and a very interesting application of fast inference at work, because that every second matters in that kind of situation. So you can't spend time typing. You just need to listen and make sure that you get the right information from your caller in the shortest possible amount of time.
Wow. Okay, so there's quite a lot to unpack out of all that, actually. So I guess the first thing, obviously, you are Italian, so you're saying literally to you, Groq. And I think just to clarify for the listeners or the viewers, this is Groq, Groq, which is the Q. This is the inference company. This is not the AI from X, Twitter, that platform. It is a separate company, Groq. And obviously, you are Italian, so you're saying Groq is like you go out in a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, and then if you come back and drive your Fiat Punto, then you're going to be disappointed. You're not going to get the same kind of feeling.
No shade to Fiat, but it gets you from A to B, just not in style.
Yes. You've been pointing about the speed of inference, so the fact that we don't need streaming anymore, because that's obviously been the weird thing with you're calling AI APIs. There's a kind of this mindset shift for developers that we're used to. We would make a single REST request, we would get back a result. And it may take a few seconds for it to come back, but that's it. And we'd get this packet of JSON or whatever with a result. And then, of course, when you start adding generative AI, because we've got the kind of time to first token and then the kind of continuous token generation, you had to kind of change your mindset and think about a streaming endpoint. And that's now become a lot more popular. And then the SDKs that are being built are kind of these more asynchronous SDKs where you don't get one result back. It's like token, 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 token. And then you end up in your code managing all the individual bits that come back. Do I have to stream these out to the console one by one? And then right at the end, I get the summary and I have to add this to my list of messages. And it becomes a whole pain, a real pain to manage this. But you're saying kind of because these advances in things like the LPUs from Groq and the speed of running these models, you can forget about streaming. You can just have one call.
Yep.
And so we're going back to that simpler API model that we had a few pre-Gen AI times.
Exactly. So see what you exactly described right there, that's streaming. If you're a developer, put yourself in the shoes of one that is to implement streaming. So you get this HTTP request, and this request doesn't give you a JSON response. It just gives you a chunk of text, and it's up to you to glue them together and figure out, up until this point, did I receive again kind of the response I needed? Do I have to do anything in particular? Like in the simplest use case, you need to get the API call for the AI service you're trying to do. Let's say you're using, I don't know, GPT-4o, Mini, O3, whatever. You have a prompt, you have messages that you already need to get right in the first place, and most of that is, has to do with the prompt. Then you need to get the response back in a string fashion. Now, the string is basically just like and a call that stays on until it's done. It could be seconds, could be minutes. So that's already a problem. The infrastructure, you need to make sure that it doesn't time out. If O3 takes more than 1 minute to reason, most servers are tailored to time out after 60 seconds of the request. So you need to make sure that your infrastructure is in place. Again, if you're a developer today, starting with AI right now, you don't even know. Like streaming is not the first concept you usually grasp. But like what you do, your hello world as a developer is to make this request and then get the result back, So you need to glue all these pieces together. Then you need to understand, do I need to do anything else? What if the AI is actually calling one or more tools? Then you need to compose a different object and need to put together this call into another call. You need to process these two calls, and then you need to get the result back. And so one of the problems and one of the reasons why I started Toolhouse was exactly for this. Like there needs to be a better way, a simpler way. Like it's not that the developer needs to solve the problem of the AI provider. Streaming exists. Streaming is just a user interface. Streaming exists because the speed of inference today, like 3 years ago, was very, very slow. And so it's a very terrible user experience if you use AI and it takes 5 seconds for it to give you a result back, right? So you kind of want to see the response generating, which is kind of cool. So you reduce the time to first token, the time it takes for the user to see the response starting to being generated, and you see that the response is getting there. So you patiently wait. But that doesn't have to be that way. That's just a side effect, something that looks cool, but it's not, because it's just us trying to get a solution for something the technology that's not fast enough just yet. And Groq basically is reversing that paradigm, saying, hey, actually can be that fast. So if you can get the response already done for you in like 0.1 second, and it's a very good, thoughtful response because there's a reasoning model behind the scenes, like Llama 3.3. There's a 70 billion parameter model there that's very cool. I replaced GPT-4o Mini with it. Most of my usage is now like Llama 3.3, and I started to use DeepSeek a little bit more. Also done by Groq. Their flavor is just amazing because it reasons pretty well. It's configurable. They already do a ton of nice touches for the developer experience. Like for example, DeepSeek has a thinking step, and it always shows you the thinking step. But with Groq, you can actually compress it and remove it. So you always serve the final response, the final answer to the user without you needing to do all the data massaging to remove that step yourself.
Yeah, which is kind of important if you're doing this kind of call tools, you don't really need that thinking step because the output that comes out, that calls the tool. So you just want to get that final output.
Yep.
Straight away. Yeah. So just digging a bit more into this example you had of they want to use it for first responders. Because obviously, if we're adding text to speech, speech to text, and that kind of capabilities, that's another time overhead. So you've got a fast generation, and then you've got the text, then you've got the kind of the speech handling or the speech to text built in. I mean, this is kind of a fantastic use case, because when we think about making those emergency calls, the times you do it, you say something and you have to wait for them to type. You say something, wait for them to type. And just the idea of, we can get rid of a lot of that processing. We can not only capture the words that you're saying as text, but then do that reasoning over them, because it's not about just filling out a form. It's understanding, okay, yeah, we need to recommend that you call the police as well, because this is, you don't need an ambulance because someone's fallen down the stairs. You need an ambulance because someone's being pushed down the stairs, therefore we need the police, or kind of whatever it is. It feels like kind of a really phenomenal use case. And I know you've been running a number of these hackathons. So what are some of the other cool things people are doing that kind of just leverage this ability to easily and quickly call tools?
Yeah, I mean, we are a horizontal developer platform, so we see a lot of disparate use cases, like the most comprehensive array of use cases. A lot of use cases are around getting more information. Like surprisingly, like developers don't want to replace humans, and they don't want to get their help. Like they find the job that they do very creatively appealing. So they want to get more, something that actually makes them better at what they do, not faster. And so we see a lot of like information retrieval. For example, email digest. Like everybody can create with Toolhouse their own personalized newsletter. And so all of a sudden, everybody becomes a content creator, and they can fine tune a newsletter based on the individual preferences of a user. So usually, when we subscribe to a news publisher's newsletter, we'll all get the same content. But I might be interested in more AI news, more finance, and maybe pets, because I have 2 cats, more than, I don't know, my coworker that's more interested in sports and politics, So with Toolhouse, we saw at hackathons actually this use case being built, where you just you input your favorite topics, and then at the cadence, at the frequency you want, you receive your updates for this kind of topics. And then at the point, what Toolhouse does behind the scenes, obviously browses the internet for the freshest pieces of news, packages them, and you can also customize the template, the format, the language. I want that kind of TLDR style newsletter. I don't want to read long articles. I just want the bullet points. So you can actually customize the delivery for each one of your users. And I think that's super powerful, because it all starts by a plain English instruction. So the LLM even creates the HTML and the CSS for the newsletter. So it's all done for you. Yeah. Another thing is on a similar fashion, like social media monitoring. So that's a use case we actually use internally, and then we open sourced it for everybody. We have connection to social media, and then, for example, do you want a Reddit monitor? You can actually tell Toolhouse, hey, I want this agent that every day gets the most active subreddits about artificial intelligence. For each one, just get me the freshest posts that require help, and if they can use help from my product, then comment. So we actually tested out. This is, again, we use this very extensively, so I know when to show up on Reddit and say, hey, Toolhouse here, we need help. So it helps us discover more and more on these use cases. We do the same with X, where we have basically a daily digest of all the positive coverage and the requests from help. So we always know where to be closer to our audience. And we saw a ton of other developers cloning those use cases and making them theirs. So there's this very interesting aspect there. Then we have like e-commerce use cases where you have like hyper personalization or certain features of a product detail page, API security. So agents that every time you push like a change in your GitHub, they just like go and check for vulnerabilities. That's done through the GitHub tool we have inside Toolhouse. And again, this is just like as now it's as easy as an API, because you just build what your agent needs to do, and that's a prompt. Then it's already deployed into an API that API goes into a GitHub action. Every time you push something, you call the API, and the API does the rest.
Nice. So again, it's relying on the fact that Toolhouse has built the tool that does all the connections to get your code out of GitHub, run it through vulnerability scanning. It's that 3 lines of code again, instant deploy API. So really, it's the engineer's hard part from the engineer's perspective, coming up with the idea.
Yeah, once you're freed of all these constraints and limitations and things you need to learn, you just go on and build. Like you finally unleash your creativity. Like either AI is this tsunami, this nuclear bomb that's going to change the economy, how we build for good, or it's going to be just the usual suspects selling it to the Fortune 500. It can be both. It's either or. Either it's for everybody, or it's for the people who can afford it. Right now, it looks as if this is for the people who can afford it, and we're trying to build a different AI here. AI for literally everybody, where you just need to go and build. You don't have to have prior knowledge. AI, is that as easy as Sam Altman says? Is it going to really make some jobs obsolete? What are we going to do with the other jobs? We're going to build other stuff so everybody can make their own 10 grand a month with small utilities that before would have taken months and teams to build. Right now, like you can have personal apps that can give you like a modest earning, maybe like 10K in MRR. You can build like 5 of them in the space of a week. Then you go and your job becomes to just market them. And then you make, like if each one yields 10 grand a month, you have 50K a month. So better than an OnlyFans creator,
One thing I do find interesting that you said there, I think it aligns a lot with my hopes and views around AI, is that it's not about to replace us. You hear these, was it Zuckerberg saying that we're going to get rid of all these mid-range engineers, which, well, without mid-range engineers, you don't get the senior engineers to verify what the AI is doing. But a lot of us, we are engineers because we love engineering. And so, you will prize my keyboard out of my cold, dead hands because I want to build code. And I never want to be in a situation where the AI is going to replace me. But instead, when we think of it as, was it Microsoft likes to say that every company is a software company. We think about all the optimizations that software can bring to everything we do on a daily basis. We don't need to just rely on a number of people that we purchase software from. Everyone can go off and build something. And so there's still going to be a demand for builders. It's just that demand is going to ramp up drastically because we're delivering things a lot faster. And suddenly we'll be automating so many parts of our lives, not so that we can just have nothing to do anymore, but instead we can do a lot more. We can be a lot more productive. If you wanted to bang out five tools that are creating you this 10K MRR, and you've got to do all the marketing, you need to monitor social media for how people are talking about it. You can build a tool to do that, just like the example you were giving. And so it just changes what we're building. We're still building, but which changes what we're building. And I think we've seen this throughout the software development world over the years. You think back to when we moved from punch cards to actually typing words into a terminal, we got more productive. When we started adding full-featured IDEs, we got more productive. We started adding all the IntelliSense and low-code development and rapid application development back in the day of Visual Basic. All these things we keep adding, they're not getting rid of developers. That just means we can build a lot more. And so we need more and more and more developers all the time. And I think that sounds like what your same belief system around Toolhouse is that we're still going to need more builders. We're just going to help them deliver more things at a faster pace.
There will be more builders. Just like when the car came out, there was a demand of oil, and there was going to be more oil, but it took years, and it took like fundamental shift in how all the aspects around the car were built to mass popularize that. And it wasn't the inventor of the engine that democratized access to cars. It wasn't the oil company that democratized access to the car. It was the makers, the builders of the car. So when Henry Ford came about, he had this great intuition because before Ford, the world was that you would have a wheel, a dashboard, an engine, a front end, and then you had to either hire somebody to assemble it for you or assemble it yourself. And obviously that was too costly. Producing all the parts like bespoke, it was basically very, very, very artisanal process. Henry Ford said, okay, this is stupid. I'm going to optimize the process of this. I'm going to build the components. Like everybody has the same wheels. Like everybody can have the same windshield. We're making this affordable for everybody, or easy to drive, and everybody drives. And what happened next? Roads were built around this concept. Cities were built around this concept. Laws. So the same will need to happen for AI, but I don't think it's going to be the big AI model companies to give us that kind of innovation, because they're actually, like, you have a company out there that got like 60 billion in funding overall. You have another one that's got 9.7. How are they going to ever return that investment to their investors at 60 times return of investment? Like every time you put a check in a company, you are expected to yield like 60, 80 times that return of investment. Like we're talking about huge amounts of money, and the return needs to be very fast, very quick, in a matter of a few years. And OpenAI has been around for already 8 years. So that return on investment is not happening right now. So the only way for them to get this return on investment fast enough is to go and charge large enterprises for large contracts, which means that F everybody else, F the rest of us. And I think that's not true. And so some of the statements, including the one from Zach you mentioned, goes towards that direction, goes towards pressuring everybody that either you pay or you're out. You're dead. Like either you embrace your AI or else. So that or else is actually a big opportunity for everybody. Like who's going to build the Ford of AI? Nobody is right now. Like Toolhouse is. Like we might be small, but we're also only 6 months old. So give us a little bit time, and if we keep growing like 43x, like we're growing now, then it's a done deal. But you see that there's a ton of stickiness and demand because developers really want to embrace it, and they just can't deal with the friction. And I understand them. That's why I built a company around it.
And I guess as well, because I know you've been talking about DeepSeek as one of the models that works very, very well. And again, that's the idea of this upstart competitor from outside the US tech ecosystem has come along and said, hey, we can do it cheaper. Now, there's still questions about, did they really do it for $5.5 million? Was that just a training cost? Whatever. Yeah, but in general, it is cheaper. To the point that I think one of the US senators was actually trying to pass a law that was you get 20 years in prison or $1 million fine if you actually use DeepSeek. Which kind of shows that the big, I hate to use the word oligarch, but it almost feels that way. But these big tech companies are kind of putting pressure on government level to keep their monopoly on AI. But if there's a rise of a lot more of these different AIs from different places, and then these upstart companies that like this Toolhouse place that can really democratize AI for people, suddenly you're going to get a complete shift in it, and that so you don't have to do the $200 a month for O3 and Hope. You've got so many more choices as a builder, and those hobbyists can really start building out their own companies. They kind of got that capability of doing it without being tied into making sure that Sam Altman gets his $60 billion back.
Exactly. So that's exactly what happened. Like the people who say that this is just a big lie perpetrated by the Chinese government to tank the US stock market are the people who fundamentally invested in this model providers and don't fundamentally understand how this cost structure of AI works. Like you can actually, when you read the paper, I'm an engineer, I can understand those papers. Besides they've been peer-reviewed by people with more credentials than I have. You understand that that's actually feasible. It's actually doable. And so there are also other signals, like model providers out there saying, yeah, we too, it costs us about the same. How come it costs you the same if you're up until a week before said that you needed more computing power? It doesn't track, So when you understand how the operational expenses work around building these models, you understand that it's very easy to commoditize models. Besides, if the model is good enough, people are going to use it. And that's the same reason why markets outside of the US prefer going with Android than an iPhone. Why? An iPhone is a fantastic piece of product, works extremely well, very curated user experience, very good materials. It costs a shit ton.
Yeah.
In Latin America, in EMEA, in India, they simply don't have the purchasing power. And so what the US did said, okay, we don't care about this market, it's too poor for us. But then you got other players, and they said, okay, don't you worry, we'll take care of those markets. And so they got the second and the third biggest market in smartphones, put them together, as big as the first one, and they sold Android-powered devices to them. And guess who those companies are? Xiaomi, Huawei, like all those companies that said we can produce things for cheaper. People will still love it because they have all the apps they will have on the iPhone, and they'll have the internet, and everything works. The DeepSeek effect has happened just like 10 years ago with smartphones, with Android. And it happened with personal computers back in the 80s when the clones disrupted IBM, and IBM eventually exited the market it created. So you just look at the pieces in history to understand what's going to happen next, because this market thinks in just one single mentality, and it tries to cookie cutter it, to repeat it. Is exactly the same. And you can draw very interesting parallels from industrial revolution, from tech revolution to the other. Like what's happening here in AI today with DeepSeek versus the big US models, it's exactly the same that happened with Android versus the iPhone, PC revolution, like just, you name it.
And I guess just think about those parallels, with this US senators trying to ban DeepSeek. The same kind of happened a little bit with, you can't have Huawei technology in the US because it's kind of a threat. But the US only represents 4% of the global population. So, the entire outside of the US market is substantial. It may not be one centralized large economy like the US, but it still is. There's a lot of wealth out there. And so by democratizing it to the non-US markets, it almost comes to a point where we don't care whether it's out in the US or not. 4% of people. We've got India, the world's most populous country. You've got China, the world's second most populous country. There's a lot of people with a lot of money to spend. And so, like DeepSeek's can be doing this. And I imagine it won't be long before there are more models coming out. DeepSeek obviously from China, but how many tech people are there in India? They don't have the spending power of the US, but just in terms of the sheer volume of tech people in India, it's feels like almost more than the rest of the world combined. So how long before the big Indian tech companies start producing their own models? And suddenly you've got this massive ecosystem outside the US, and the OpenAIs and the Metas start to seem irrelevant.
Exactly. And if you do the economies of scale right, then you can spread the cost among all these people. And so you have like the unit economics will work out eventually. It happens for smartphones. It happens for cars. Like Tata is one of the biggest companies out there, probably one of the biggest in India. And they produce a ton of cars, but it also happens in smaller markets with higher higher spend per person, like Sweden. Like think of Volvo, the Swedish manufacturer of cars. How many Fords are there sold in Sweden? Not many. How many Volvos? Pretty much all of them. Who owns Volvo? A Chinese company now. So it's like you need to place your bets wherever there's the best understanding of the market. And I think this has happened again, in like time and time again, in showing that you need to go where you understand the market the best. And democratizing AI also has a component of that. Once you start understanding what the market needs and how to sell it, then you figure out the unit economics. Like the startup environment has been like this for since forever. Like Uber, Lyft, they heavily kept artificially subsidized the prices, so you could like ride for $4 and outmarket the cab rides. But that helped you use the service more and get convinced that was a much better experience than riding a cab, right? And then all of a sudden, time's up. We need to get profitable. IPO, no more subsidized rides. They became profitable, and now obviously Uber costs much more than a cab ride. So you get to usage, you get to growth before you can get to profitability. And I'm really surprised that now with AI, it seems like everybody can go directly for paying something that's still massively not profitable. And just to prove a point, the point being, we own this technology, nobody else can touch it. And then what happened? China came and said, this doesn't work like that. Actually, the world works a little differently, and they just proved that entire system can exist in a certain market, but it doesn't work that way elsewhere. Like AI will be democratized no matter what. Like no matter how hard they try, the democratic part of AI will win, because this is going to be like in the end a geopolitical battle. Like there are going to be nations without access to AI that need to pay the toll to the nations with AI, and that is going to be very dangerous. I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's going to be almost like a tech revolution from the people, and obviously I'm behind that. Actually, at the front of that. Like I think I wish there would be like many competitors to Toolhouse, because the more the better. The more platforms that democratize AI, the better for the world.
Yeah, the more people have access, the better it will be. It's that rising tide lifts all ships type idea. If everyone's building with it, everyone's using it, what problems can we solve throughout the world? If you've got developing nations that have got access to democratized AI and they're thinking, right, how do we deal with problems around disease? How do we deal with problems around famine? They now have the technology that they can apply in a way that the developed world doesn't really have to deal with these problems anymore, because they've had the technology for years and they've dealt with it. But suddenly bringing that into countries that didn't have that, it becomes cheap enough for them to actually try these things out, solve their problems. That's never a bad thing for humanity as a whole.
Exactly. So, I go back to the title of this podcast, like a Pieces AI Productivity Podcast. And productivity is just a small part of what AI can do. Like you nailed it. Like AI can do so many things. Like it can get us closer to really solve diseases or solve big problems like access to food that people didn't have before. And if you want to gate that, it needs to be illegal. Come on. And so we'll see that battle unfolding, but also you'll have knowledge that's already out there. Now you have this, the Sputnik moment with DeepSeek versus the US models. How is the US going to react to that? Are we going to build more just agents for the sake of building agents, and then just like again selling it to enterprise customers, or are we going to do something that it costs less? But if it costs less in the US, then it means that your value proposition of selling to enterprises kind of falls down, because kind of falls apart, because now you don't have the same return on investment. So it's kind of a checkmate moment more than a Sputnik moment for when what concern the economics of scale of AI. So it's a very interesting battle to watch. And I think again, this is one of the hints that when you popularize AI and make it exactly for everybody, then everybody will have access at a reasonable price that will use it more. So you will eventually still recover from the investment. You can't have all of it and you want it right now. It's not everything everywhere all at once. It's going to happen. Just give it time. Like, what's the rush? And the rush is there are some funds that need to return their investments because it's about time. Like there are first companies, the first AI companies started like 10 years ago. And the maturity of an investment, like that 60, 80x return on investment, it yields after 10 years. After 10 years, you say, okay, this company didn't work out. We poured this much money, we didn't get anything in return. It's part of the game. But people are trying to artificially accelerate that. And I don't know. I'm very skeptical that's going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah. So kind of we don't want that boom idea of a tech boom. If we throw money in, we get money out straight away. We need to do it slower, build the foundations, and just, as you say, through the economies of scale, as more people have access, you will eventually start getting all the money coming in. It's like, Microsoft probably didn't make much money selling Windows right back at the start, but then when they reached the point where everyone had a Windows machine at their home, then you get that economy of scale. Same kind of idea. It's stop thinking about how do I get back billions. Stop thinking about the unicorn model straight away. It's how do we build that slow, steady growth? How do we make sure that it's everywhere?
Jim, that's a perfect metaphor. Like if IBM and Microsoft in the 80s were like this, like linked to one another, and they were even building operating systems together. Like there was this operating system, I think that needs a podcast on its own, OS2. Oh my God, it's like a very interesting project, and how it went wrong, it was also super interesting. But fundamentally, Microsoft was the engine of growth for IBM because they had the most popular developer ecosystem. Again, it's people building things on top of platforms, not the platform itself. IBM was this big. They didn't realize that the personal computer could be for the masses until it was too late, because they were the international business machines. And so they didn't have that, like, their like personal computing arm. Like, they didn't have the direct consumer sales channels. So they were not familiar with those dynamics. And then what happened? Somebody figured out how to clone legally the same architecture. Let's not forget, like, the IBM PC, the personal computer, was made out of components off the shelf. So it was easy for anybody to just like assemble it, create it, and just like sell it maybe for cheap, or sell it to many people. And so you had a ton of clones. And then the biggest remained. Like, Compaq was one of the biggest one, Canadian company, and they started to just be the personal computer selling to the masses. And so they didn't just like sell computers just to enterprise. They didn't have enterprise contracts, but mostly everybody could purchase a Compaq computer, came for like cheaper and had better performance than an IBM computer. And guess what? It also had the Microsoft operating system. So obviously Microsoft thrived out of this ecosystem of clones because it will reach the masses. So again, the parallel that I mentioned before with smartphones and the personal computer era, it's exactly that, and it's going to happen again.
And the same with Toolhouse as well. This is kind of your vision for Toolhouse of just, it's in everything. So if you make it easy enough to use, things like Toolhouse will reach the masses, because everyone's either going to build an agent with it, or they will sell an app that uses a Toolhouse agent. And it's just that friction reduction. It's just a little bit easier, just a little thing, rather than trying to we want to be worth $100 billion right now in 10 years or whatever it is. It's like, how do we think about that economies of scale here? How do we get something small that we put into as many places as possible and grow through scale that way, rather than going to an enterprise and say, you have to give me a big sack of money?
Right. I had the pleasure of getting my early career. I started at what this company now it's called Meta. I don't know if you remember. It was called Facebook.
Yep.
And I was privileged enough to have worked when at the Facebook, the startup. I stayed like pre-IPO to post-IPO, so I saw this very quick evolution, very, very rapidly. One thing that we always used to say there was, do the right thing, the money will follow. Like, don't be so hung up onto revenue. Don't think about revenue right away. Think about what's best for your users, your customers, and then customers will come. And that's what, like, the early success of Facebook was exactly that. Like, do the right thing for people. Like, I think there was a Facebook that actually believed that you wanted to make the world more open and connected. And I think the mission has been like genuine and truthful up until at some point. I left like slightly like post IPO, but so I didn't witness all the entire like Cambridge Analytica stuff. I saw I saw it in the making, but I was detached. Thankfully, I didn't have to find a lawyer for that. But the thing is, like, it's exactly like that. Like, they stay closer to what the users need and their met needs of people, cater to those, and then you have the success. And that explains the success of a product with a global reach, like Meta and Facebook in particular, like the first platform to ever get 1 billion, then 2 billion users.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I feel this is a good point to wrap up. It's been absolutely great having you on the show. Some really good stuff there. Yeah, so thank you very much. I guess any last closing thoughts?
Just sign up for Toolhouse, toolhouse.ai, to find the future that you want to build for yourself. It's free. You have 500 executions a month. That's enough for pretty much like most of our users for now. It's like, start building for AI. I think this is a massive tsunami, and you better be prepared. And we are there to help everybody out. So Toolhouse.ai, if you need help, come find us on Discord as well, where we do things that don't scale so long as developers are covered. They know how to navigate this AI world.
Cool. I'll make sure there's links to all that in the show notes. Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.